Hey, welcome back to the Fuse Show, everybody. My name is Bud, and I am account executive here at xfusion.io and the co-host of the Fuse Show. I am excited to be joined today by my guest, Patrick Boyaggi. Patrick is the co-founder and CEO of OwnUp, a Boston-based company changing how people seek out, secure, and compare mortgages. Propelled by Boyaggi's belief that everyone should understand their mortgage, OwnUp provides a combination of intelligent software and personalized advice from mortgage experts. Welcome to the show, buddy. Thanks for being on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, bud.
All right, so before we get started and talking about OwnUp, I just have to go here real quick. So before founding OwnUp, you were the senior vice president at a top 50 national lender. You were responsible for the residential leading division and closed over $11 billion in residential mortgages. But you did not go to your own bank for your own mortgage. Is that correct?
That is true.
I'm guessing that little caveat there kind of propelled you to what ended up being OwnUp. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're absolutely correct, bud. The fact of the matter is that lending is about fit. Okay, not every lender is right for every borrower, and not every lender is right for every property type. And moreover, when you do find those lenders that are most suitable for your particular needs, it's imperative that you get the best deal. The money from bank ABC is just as green as the money from mortgage company XYZ. And so, I knew that. And I knew the importance of making sure that you don't overpay for your mortgage. The difference was that I had access to information that most consumers and most borrowers do not. And that was because I was a mortgage insider. And so I was able to determine the exact range of offers that would be available to me for my very specific situation. And I was able to use that information to find a lender that offered a great deal. And then I used that information to negotiate an even better deal than they were offering. And, the end result is that the difference between if I had gone with my own bank versus the path that I took was more than $40,000 over the life of my loan. So that's not an insignificant amount of money that I was able to save for my family by going through this. And that was really the aha moment, bub. That was the time when I realized there are millions of people who go through this home financing experience every single day, and they're not playing on the same level playing field as lenders. Lenders have more information than borrowers. And so they use that information asymmetry to prey on consumers or to take advantage of them. And, this is not a new thing. Anytime that a seller has more information than a buyer, the seller always gets a better deal. Mm-hmm. And that's true for selling cars, and why you've started to see, the elimination of information asymmetry in the car buying experience have such a profound impact on people's lives. And the same goes for mortgages, and that's ultimately what we're doing at OwnUp.
Nice. So if you've taken what as the lender, and you've just basically given that to the people, and you've taken all that transparency and you've basically turned the screen to the people, and you said, here you go. And now everybody has that information that come to you, and you walk everybody through step by step. You say, here's all the information that I have as a senior vice president. You have it too. Let's walk through this together, and I'm going to give you the best deal that I can offer you. And that's it. I mean, basically, that's what OwnUp is.
Yeah, philosophically, we are flipping the power dynamic between borrowers and lenders by eliminating information asymmetry, and we're revealing the optimal path forward for every borrower. Okay. Now, practically speaking, that means that we've built this technology that allows anyone to see the exact range of loan offers available across the entire market. And so the technology I referenced there is that we gather loan pricing data from more than 16,000 lenders every single day. Okay. And we present that information to consumers in a fully transparent manner, as you said. So just as you can figure out what the value of your home is, on Zillow, or you can figure out what you should pay for a car using TrueCar, you can now figure out what's the exact range of offers across the entire market for your mortgage at OWNA. And then on top of that, what we've done is we've created a marketplace of lenders. Okay, we vet each and every lender, and we present you offers from those lenders side by side so you can compare them apples to apples. And every single one of those lenders will present an offer that beats the market average, and at least one of them will be in the top 10% of all offers all across the country. Okay. On top of that, what we've done is we've created a concierge marketplace. Okay. So this includes access to licensed mortgage experts. We refer to them as home advisors, and they're basically mortgage shopping advocates. So they will get on the phone, they provide you with unbiased advice about how to secure a market-beating rate on our platform, or how to use the information we've given to you to negotiate better deals with your existing lender. And so all of this is done without you having to provide your social security number, with only doing a soft credit check, and we never sell your information. So you'll never be spammed and you'll never receive any unwanted calls. And the way we think about it is it's all upside using OwnUp and no downside. I mean, every single borrower in America could benefit from the customized data and personalized advice that we offer. And because we do it without any obligation, there's really no reason you shouldn't do it.
Right. And that kind of takes me to what one of my next questions was going to be, was how are you different than a mortgage broker on the internet? And that's really basically it. Is you get onto a mortgage broker site and they ask for all that, right? They ask for your social security number, they ask for that, and then they start selling all your information, and you just start getting inundated with offers. You don't do that.
Exactly. Yeah, there's three types of ways you can get a mortgage, right? There's a direct lender. Okay. And so these are like banks and credit unions and mortgage companies, and their motivation is actually to get you to lock in an offer with them. Right. And they thrive on this information asymmetry. Because if you were exposed to the information we offer, then you may choose not to go with that particular lender. You could use a mortgage broker, which effectively operates very much like a direct lender, only they work with a select group of lenders that, that they're called wholesale lenders, where they'll present you offers from them. But ultimately, they want you to work with just those 3 to 5 lenders that, they have relationships with. So you get slightly more options presented to you, but they have limitations on what they can do in terms of like really getting you better deals. And they certainly wouldn't show you the full range, and they certainly wouldn't help you negotiate with your existing lender. Then you have lead generators. Those are companies that, basically just put up information, their teaser rates. They're trying to entice you to click because they get paid when you click, and they make money by selling your information to the highest bidders. And they really have no regard for your well-being because they get paid on that click. And so we've really reimagined the way you can go through this home shopping experience. As I said, we have built a mortgage shopping platform for borrowers, not for lenders. Okay. This is the way I went through the experience as an expert, and we recreated that so that every single American can have that same advantage. And again, we've built it such that it's all upside and no downside.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're able to save just thousands of dollars over the life of a loan. How are you able to do that? And I've read a lot of your stuff, so I understand how you're able to do that. But explain to people how you're able to get such a dramatic discount for people.
Yeah, it's a very great question. So, look, the majority of loans are sold in the secondary market. Okay, so this is a very technical term, but it's sort of, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but at the end of the day, consumer lenders make more money when they charge consumers higher interest rates or when they charge consumers more in fees and cost. Okay. So there's this inherent misalignment of incentives in the mortgage industry. The worse deal you get as a consumer, the more money I make as a lender. That's a flawed system. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so, what we've done is we have built technology that allows us to operate more efficiently. We have built a collaborative fintech that integrates with multiple lenders. And so we are able to operate very efficiently. And as a result, we only charge our lenders. So our consumers pay nothing to use our service and to get access to our information. The way we make money is if a consumer decides to work with one of the lenders on our platform, that lender will pay us a fee. It's a success-based model. Okay, so our incentives are aligned with the consumer and they're aligned with the lender, right? We want to find the right match and we want to make sure that it's a successful outcome. We get paid a fee by the lender when the loan closes. That's 0.4% of the loan amount. Okay, the average fee that just a mortgage salesperson makes is more than 1% of the loan amount. And so the difference there in what we're able to make and what a lender typically charges is what leads to that better financial outcome for the consumer. Okay, we don't say to the lender, hey, we're charging you less so you get to make a bigger profit. We're saying we're charging you less and you have to return that excess profit back to the consumer in the form of lower interest rates and better terms. It's really just arbitrage on behalf of consumers. And so, we just fundamentally believe that technology has unlocked so much for consumers. I mean, if you look at the most impactful technology companies of the internet era, Bud, they've done one thing and they've done one thing consistently, and that is save consumers money. And so we want to apply that same principle to the biggest financial transaction of most people's lives, which is getting their home. And so, we hear a lot, if you're making less, then you can't provide great service. Well, we've got over 4,000, 5-star reviews. We have a net promoter score of 90. I would beg to differ there. We are matching better financial outcomes or low interest rates with great customer service and a great experience. Technology makes it possible that those two things are no longer mutually exclusive. You no longer have to just get really bad service in order to get a better financial outcome or get great service and pay for it. You can do both. And technology companies have really unlocked that.
Right. I love that. I want to go back just a little bit to when you started that answer. And bring something up that you just kind of skipped over, which I think is huge. And you said you get paid if somebody goes with you. You don't get paid all the time. You can do all this work with somebody and they can decide not to go with you, and you can still walk them through this whole process and you're happy to. And they can decide to go with somebody else, and you don't get anything. I think that is an absolutely amazing thing that you're doing over at OwnUp, and you're willing to walk people through at the chance of not making any money. Explain that.
I mean, thank you for acknowledging that. We just believe fundamentally that no borrower should ever overpay for their mortgage, and that we have a responsibility given our knowledge of the industry and what we've been able to build to make that possible for every consumer. And so we're a for-profit institution, Bud. We want to make money. We want to grow our business. We want to build an indelible consumer finance brand. But the way you do that in consumer finance is by building trust. Okay.
Right.
And the way that you earn somebody's trust is to be transparent, to align your incentives with theirs. And our belief is that over the long haul, that will prove to be our greatest source of customer acquisition, right? If I could come to you, Bud, and help you navigate your home financing experience and help you achieve a better financial outcome than you would if you didn't, and I give you peace of mind, you're going to go and tell others about it. And so the other piece to that, Bud, is when we are transparent with data, when we show you this range of offers that exist across the market, it's impossible for me to then try and compel you to take a worse deal. I mean, it is possible for you to have secured a better offer on your own than you could through our platform. The odds are in our favor, but it's not entirely out of the realm of possibilities that you will do that. And if you do, and we've already showed you the range of offers, and we've shown you very transparently what we can secure you, and you have a better deal, we're going to tell you that. Why? Because if we didn't, we'd be bold-faced liars. And you never want, you can't build a trustworthy brand doing that. And that's what lenders do, though, all the time. They know that their offer is not the best out there, and they will do everything to discredit the other person that you could potentially work with and try and convince you that you should, for some reason, work with them. And that's just not an approach that we're going to take. And so, in this game of the mortgage industry, the cost to acquire customers are pretty well established. It's an established industry. It's a massive market with a lot of players. So the winners are not going to be the ones that pay to acquire customers more efficiently than others. I mean, sure, that's beneficial to your business, but the real winners are going to be the ones that figure out how to drive all of this free and organic traffic. And the way you do that is you build a trustworthy service that benefits everybody, that's fair and honest and upfront about it. And then one customer turns into two, and two customers turn into four. And that's really, our belief. And we've seen that happen with other businesses and other industries. And so, it's not a playbook that's entirely unique to us, but we believe in it very firmly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And those two words, aligned incentives, are huge and powerful. And that's the way we live and breathe our business here at Xfusion as well. Like, we don't always get the people that we go after because we're not the right fit, and we'll scoot them on to the next people because, like, they're looking for a certain price point and we're not that, or they're looking for something and we're not quite that, so we're just not the right fit for you. Go here. And that has turned into different business for us because those people say, hey, go to Xfusion because they'll make sure that you're right. And I see that being the same for you. And if you're a business owner listening to this, get those words in your head, aligned incentives, because it is powerful, powerful stuff. And you need to make sure that you're aligned with your consumer. An example, my best friend's dad, when he was, before he passed on, he was trying to sell his house and he wanted carpet, but he's from an older generation. He's like, I know what I want to spend. I know what I want for carpet. If it's within that price range, I'm just going to get it. Right. But now his grandchildren are like, I need carpet in my house, but I am going to get the absolute best carpet for the absolute cheapest price. And they're shopping. Like, two completely different mindsets from two completely different generations. Right. And that's where we're headed with the new consumers coming up, is they want the best possible product for the best possible price and the best customer service. And we're just moving away from the older generation's mindset as, I have this money and I want to spend, and I just don't care, right? To the new generation where they're coming up and say, I want the best product, I want the best price point, I want the best customer service, and we have to align ourselves with that, and you're doing that. So, I mean, kudos to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that today's consumer no longer hopes for those things. They demand it. They expect it. And the internet has made that possible. And, companies that are at the forefront of doing that, it's our belief will become the most successful. Aligning those interests, providing people with information, access to information that they otherwise, was previously gated. And, that unlock is a really powerful thing, and it empowers consumers to do what's in their best interest, not, just succumb to what a financial institution or any company that's selling, a product wants them to. And so I think it's a really exciting time. I think it's a great thing for consumers. I think that it's making the world a better place. And I think there are plenty of companies that can be wildly successful in adapting to this type of market.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to go into just your business and how it's being ran and how it has been ran for the last few years, because you started in February of 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And since this is a program for founders and future founders, like 2016 to 2019, early in 2020, right? Things probably, I'm guessing, are going pretty good. And then boom, right? The world gets turned on its head. Like, how do you navigate that? How does your office look at that point? Are you in office? Are you remote? How do you navigate through what COVID did, and how does that change the way that you run your office and your business at that point?
Yeah, well, I would tell you, like everybody else, now that we're, we've been in this for such a long time, hindsight's always sort of 2020. You look back at it and you sort of think that it's a new norm, and you're accustomed to sort of dealing with things the way they are. In fact, the matter is, when this happened, nobody knew how to handle any of this. And it was really a scary time for everybody. And I recall telling our entire team, I have no idea how to manage this company through a global pandemic. I've never done it before. There's no training for this. And so I'm not sure what we're going to do. But what I can tell you is that we'll approach it the same way we've approached everything else, which is, very, very prudently, and that we will be very open about the decisions we're making, and we're going to do things that, we think are in the best interest of our employees and our customers. And so we prioritize the well-being of our employees first and foremost, like most companies. And so we did go from being in office to being remote. And that was a challenge. Now it sort of feels like second nature, being able to get on, video calls and, being able to work from your home and all those sort of things. But, that was hard, especially for our company, which values culture and being together and collaboration as much as we do. And so we just, try to invest in the technology to support that. But also, helping our employees figure out how they could navigate their home offices and thinking about how we could financially support them through that. And then just thinking about how we keep engagement really high. And so one thing I'm really proud of is, like, virtually every single meeting we have, even if it's just a quick team huddle or, a quick conversation with somebody, is usually done by video. It's rare that we see people getting on the phone. And that's just to continue to build that personal connection to people and that bond with one another. So we went fully remote, and, have just tried to continue to maintain a focus on our people and our culture, We ended up growing our business quite dramatically during that time frame, just because market conditions were such that interest rates had fallen to historic lows, and there were a lot of homeowners that could refinance their business. So we had to hire a lot of people, and bringing a lot of new people on presented its own unique set of challenges in a normal environment, let alone when you're operating fully remote. And so I think we've done a pretty good job of it. I would say it's all a testament to our people ops team. It's a testament to our people caring about the new people that join and trying to create a culture of collaboration. There's some things that we've done really well, and there's some things that we've fallen short on. And
Sure.
That's the case with everything. So you just try and learn from those things and just continue to get better.
Nice. So what did you find is your biggest pain point, and did that change, as the times changed? Like, what was your biggest pain point when you first started? And I'm sure that, 2016 to 2021, that's, 5 years, 6 years. They change, pain points change as companies grow anyway. But, does the pain point change because of the pandemic, or is it just a natural progression of pain point changing as the company just grows naturally?
Yeah, I think there's, a natural evolution of any business. As you grow, the problems change. In some cases, they can change daily, weekly, monthly. And then over the years, they obviously do as you start to scale up your business. And so I think market conditions are just one component of that. And so I don't think that the pandemic necessarily was, a reason for us to change our business in any way. Fundamentally, our business has stayed exactly the same. It's just as you grow and evolve, there's different things that you're trying to do. Very early on, we were, just 3 people, and we were trying to figure out, what the heck to do every day, and just get this thing started. Then, we built a platform, we built a marketplace of lenders. We were able to, establish that early product market fit. And then it was about building the team and, determining where to prioritize the investments you make in building your product and other aspects of operations and sales and marketing. And then, the pandemic hit, and it sort of changed the environment where there was sort of insatiable demand. And so then you respond to that differently than when you were trying to generate that demand yourself. And so, yeah, it's just always changing. And I think the pandemic certainly threw a wrench in a lot of this. But, one of the most important attributes, I think, of any business and any leader is your ability to adapt and, change with the times. And so we've just done our very best to make that, make that happen.
Nice. Now, I do wonder, your team, how do you navigate your team, and has that changed with going from in-house to fully remote? Here, we've always been fully remote, and we operate on a high autonomy, high trust, and always have, schedule here. There's obviously metrics that we can use to see if our people are working and things like that. And that's what we use to make calls on if we need to do something about letting people go or things like that. But it's a very high trust, high autonomy company, right? Is that how you operate there? And has that changed from being in-house to going fully remote? Or how do you handle your team in that way?
Yeah, I don't think our culture has changed in any regard pre to post pandemic. I think the way we interact and the mechanisms for communicating to one another has changed, right? We went from sort of virtually everybody being in the office to all of us being remote. But the same principles that we founded our business on for consumers, we try and apply to our employees, right? That's about being transparent, being honest, doing what's in the best interest of your employees, and putting their needs and concerns first. And so we try to do that. Again, I think that's something you're always working on. You've never perfected. You got to be constantly trying to get better at that, and that's something that we're always focused on. And I think one of the ways that you can do that is, with things like, being very clear about what your vision for your company is, what the mission of the company is, trying to set very clear goals for your company, and then having your teams be able to have those goals cascade down to the teams so that the teams know what they can focus on, and really building empowered teams, right? Making sure that all of our teams are, I read this book recently called Empowered, which is, I think the subtitle is, ordinary people building extraordinary products. And the author, Marty Cagan, talks a lot about, making sure your employees are missionaries, not mercenaries, right? Not just
I like that.
The manager tells them to do, but, really setting forth this mission and a clear articulation of what you want to accomplish, and then letting your people go and do that. We hire them, they're talented, we trust them, we want them to go do great things. And then in terms of monitoring performance, you just try and make that assessment as objective as possible. Sure. Anytime you can rely on objective measures, it's going to be far better than, subjective measures, because you have all sorts of things that cloud that assessment when it's very subjective. And just be open and honest and have those hard conversations earlier rather than later.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue into moving on to kind of the next section of this conversation. I really like your answer there, but I kind of want to move into what is the mission and values, because I think those probably very closely align with what I've found to be kind of your mission and values as a person, which, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're very family oriented, very community oriented, just very people oriented. So what is your why as a company and just as a person in general? What motivates you?
Yeah, well, as I stated earlier, our mission is to ensure that no borrower ever overpays for their mortgage. And we fundamentally believe that we can make that possible. And we do so by flipping that power dynamic between borrowers and lenders and eliminating information asymmetry to reveal the optimal path forward. And I think if you were to go around to our company and ask people what our mission is, that everybody be able to recite that to you. And when we talk about our vision for our company, they know what that is as well. I think personally, I just think that I have a responsibility. I was raised in a family where we were taught to live our lives in a certain fashion, and to do things the right way. And I want to make sure that I pass down those same principles to my children. And actions always speak louder than words, bud. And so when you work in financial services, you really do have the opportunity to profoundly impact people's lives. I mean, I would argue the only other industry that's going to have a bigger impact on consumers is healthcare, right? I mean, if you can help people with their health, that's the most important thing. But when you help people with their finances, that's pretty darn important as well, in large part because it's not about just saving money. Saving money creates opportunity, right? And it helps people. And so, I just want to, at the end of the day, my name is the only thing that I have, and my reputation is the most important thing. And so I could either go through my life, in a fashion where I care more about myself and, do things for me more than anybody else, or, you can try and live your life where you can impact the lives of others and make the world a better place. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And those things are important to me.
Nice. So what I can notice when I'm looking you up here and going through your Twitter, going through your LinkedIn, going through things like that, is a lot of times when I look up, especially male co-founders and CEOs or owners of companies, is it's all about the company, right? I find things about the company, and if they do have extracurriculars going on, it has to do with more about the company, right? One thing I absolutely love when I looked up your Twitter, it says you're the father of Noah, Connor, and Graham, and you're the husband of Hannah, and the co-founder of OwnUp. Like there's way more to you than just your company. And I think that just speaks volumes to who you are as a person. And I have a feeling, like you just said, growing up, that you were told that there was, there has to be more, you have to do more for others, right? And I really think that you are. We spoke about this just a little bit before coming on to the show. And typically I don't like getting into what could be considered political talk, but with you, things aren't political. This is just who you are as a person and the way that you run your life and your company. So explain to me just how the events of the past 2 years have kind of shaped and changed you and your family with regards to kind of Black Lives Matter, just the way that you run your company with regards to LGBTQ. Just explain to me why the community-based things are so important to you, and why it's not political and it's just who you are.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Bud. I would say for me, and what we try to emphasize for all our employees, is that, your personal well-being and your family matters way more than our company ever will. There are priorities in everybody's life, and we want people to care very, very much about OwnUp and what we're doing, and we want people to commit themselves and to work really hard. And we set pretty ambitious goals for ourselves, and we have a high standard that we've set for our employees, and hopefully I emulate that, and my co-founders Mike and Brent do the same thing, so that we lead by example. But we want people to have that work-life balance. We want people to understand that, if something happens with your family, that, you need to address that right away. And it's far more important than, making sure that, some product gets delivered on a day or the next day. And so that's important to us. And so we try and go about that. I think in terms of the events of the last couple of years, they've opened our eyes. We have seen that as much as we want this country to be the beacon for, the rest of the world and how we behave and how we treat people, that we may have been fooling ourselves when we think about how we treat each other, and what fairness and equality really means. And so for me, I learned a lot about our society. I learned a lot about myself, and we were just very open and honest with our employees and said, look, we all need to get better. We spend a lot of time and energy here at work. If you think about it, you spend more hours at work than you do anywhere else, right? I mean, when you're at home, you're sleeping the majority of the time. And so if we're going to be here, then we should create an environment that cares for one another, that holds us accountable to thinking about diversity, equitability, and inclusion. And so we've just tried to set a standard for ourselves. There's a lot of work to do. And this is, something that we talked about with our company. This is an ongoing thing. This is a lifelong journey, as an individual, and as a company, we are constantly evolving and trying to get better. And yeah, as you said, this is not, I think, from a politics standpoint, both sides of the aisle want to do the right thing. Both sides of the aisle care about people, and they just have slightly different philosophies. But I don't think, this is a political statement at all. This is just a statement about wanting to build our business in a certain fashion. And, we just think that there are very clear lines when you can do something the right way and when you can do something the wrong way. And we try and always err on the side of doing things the right way. And so we try and also keep an environment that's open and allows for feedback so that we know when we're falling short or when we could get better at that, and try and make it a very collaborative environment so that everybody has a say. And, we're not going to make everybody happy with every decision that we make, but we'll be thoughtful about the decisions that we make, and we'll communicate the logic behind those. And I think people will respect that.
Yeah, I think so too. And, not everybody's going to agree with everything that you do outside of work. But I think if people look at what you do, I think everybody can agree with what OwnUp is doing. Like, put your stuff aside and just look at what OwnUp is doing, and it's for everybody. Like, no matter how much money you're making, no matter what color you are, no matter what gender you are, no matter what sex you are, like, OwnUp is for everybody, and they can help you. They can help you, or they can't help you, but they will let you know. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's, we've seen this in other industries, right? The democratization of industries. And so I think you're spot on in that we don't believe that every single person will work with the lenders inside our network, but we do believe that every single person should start their home financing journey with OwnUp. Again, there's all upside and no downside to it. And we just think that that's a long-term strategy that will really differentiate us.
Yeah. So thank you for, opening yourself up and those personal thoughts and feelings there. I love this show because it gets to the heart of what founders are, for their, for that. It just gets to the heart of who people are at times. That being said, you said most of our time is spent at work. And I do agree with that. My work is at home, but most of my time is spent up in my room on my computer. So how do you balance your work-life balance? Being a founder, being an owner, being in charge of, what do you have? Over 130 employees at this point. How do you balance your work-life balance?
Well, that I think is a challenge for everybody. It's just the way our society and sort of system is set up, right? We work 5 days a week for a certain amount of hours, and and then you have to sort of squeeze your life into that. I do think the pandemic, to a certain extent, has changed that a little bit, in that when you do work remotely, you're able to sort of have your life, and then you try and fit sort of work in there. I love to work. I was raised by my mom and dad, who were both very hard workers and instilled a really great work ethic. And, I was taught that a busy life is a happy life. And so, I love to work. I love what we're doing at Own Up. I think we have the opportunity to really impact the world in a positive place. We have a lot of employees now that have entrusted us as their employer, and they've come here to try and grow their professional careers, and so we're committed to that as well. And the only way you succeed is you got to work hard. There's no doubt about that. And so, but I think you can work smart and not just work hard, bud. And I think in today's world, because we are remote, and because you can, log in at any given time, when those important moments are happening in your life, make sure you don't miss out on them because they just happen to take place in a particular hour in the day, And so we trust our employees implicitly to say, look, if you have something that's going on at 5:00, and you need to leave at 4:00 to make that happen, don't miss out on it, right? And if you still have some work that you need to get done, and you want to get that work done when you return from that, then go ahead. Or if you can get that work done in that shorter period of time because you have figured out a way to operate very efficiently, and we can objectively measure that, and it's in fact true, then absolutely do that. The only thing we'd ask of you is, how do you train the others around you to do the same thing? Right.
Yeah.
And so, work-life balance is a really important topic. It's something that we need to continue to focus on. It's a hard topic. I don't know that I have, all the right answers or the best answers to it. But you just try and go through each experience and learn from it, and make sure that you get better at it yourself. And then, if you have figured out techniques to be really good at it, make sure that you share it. And we have people on our team that are focused on trying to make sure that, we're thinking about that and that we're creating a good environment for that.
Awesome. What's the biggest difference that you've noticed with mostly working at home, being remote, since the pandemic started with you personally?
I would spend a lot of time commuting in and out of, getting into work and then getting out. And that time that I no longer have to spend doing that, I've been able to commit to either myself and focusing on mindfulness and, making sure that I'm in a good place physically and mentally. Which is really nice, because when you start a company and you're a parent, as you well know, bud, you try and be very selfless, and you try and focus on all the others, especially those little people that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
And so the ability to sort of take that time and not be taking it away from your commitment to them, but being able to commit it to yourself is really, that's something that I've cherished. And then just getting to spend more of those little moments with my family, I think has been really cool. When our kids kids came home like most, and they were remote, we'd work, and then you'd have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them every single night. And, that was really nice. That was fun. And then when they went back to school and my wife and I were still working from home, I told her, I was like, this co-working space had really dropped off, because it was just her and I having lunch during the day. It was far more entertaining when we had our kids around. I mean, it was a little hectic. They certainly provided a lot of entertainment for us. So, yeah, I mean, I think everybody's going through this time and trying to figure out how to handle it best. But yeah, you try and find the joy in whatever circumstances you're dealt with.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly sad how few families have dinner together anymore, even during the pandemic. Like we have family friends over, the kids' family friends over, and they're like, "You guys do this all the time?" Like, yeah, we've always done this. They're like, really? It's just astounding to me how few families have dinner around the table anymore.
Yeah, that's a whole other
ya.
topic. Yeah, I just think like, yeah, family is a really important part of my life, and I want to instill those values in our kids. And you start doing that when they're young, and hopefully, they'll continue to do that. But for me, there's a lot of people that don't have that luxury, and we got to be aware of that. There's a lot of families that would love to do it, but they're under far more trying circumstances than others. And so, but for us, we feel very blessed and fortunate to be in that position. And, I just learn something new every day from my kids, and they make me laugh, and they bring a lot of joy to my life. And I'm just very grateful for that.
Yeah. And do enjoy it, because as we talked about before the show, I have two that are out of the house already, and it goes fast. So
Yeah.
enjoy it all, because they'll be gone quickly. Getting down to the end of it, so I've got probably just about 3 more questions. So, what advice would you give to yourself if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago?
Wow, that's a great question. I think a very important virtue is awareness, and being aware of who you are, where you are, what the context around you is. And I think when you're young, you're so focused on yourself and what you want to accomplish and what you want to do, and you kind of lose that perspective. And so, just being more aware, I think is really an important attribute and characteristic of somebody that goes through and lives a happy life.
Nice. I like it. And then the last 2 questions that I ask everybody that's on this program is, what advice would you give to founders or soon-to-be founders that are going to be watching this program?
Well, there's 2 types of risk in life. There's the risk of action and there's the risk of inaction. And the risk of action is really scary and frightening. And, as you're going through it, there'll be a lot of sleepless nights. There's going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be a lot of things that don't work out the way they are. And the flip side, there's going to be some amazing times. There's going to be those successes and those rushes that you don't get, not being an entrepreneur. That's the risk of action. The risk of inaction is that, you go about your days and you live your life, and then you look back on it and you regret that you never actually did anything about it. And so don't be afraid of the risk of action.
Nice. That's one that I haven't quite heard yet, so I like that answer. And then the last question that I ask everybody is, what is the best way for viewers to get in touch with you if they so choose?
Yeah, you can go to ownup.com. Right there on our site, you can, get access to information. You can provide us with some of your details and, schedule a call with one of our home advisors. But yeah, just right on our website, ownup.com is the best way to get a hold of us.
Awesome. Patrick Boyaggi of OwnUp. Like you said, not everybody has to end up using their product, but everybody should start there. I don't disagree with that. Thank you for being on the show, my friend. It was awesome. You have a really great day.
Thanks, bud. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.